Good morning, this is Eva. I wanted to continue on with talking about biblical characters and psychological disorders or personality disorders according to the DSM-5. And I'm probably going to get into King Herod today, and if we have time, I might talk a little bit about King David's sons and an episode that happened with them. That was, well, it's a long story. Anyway, let's just start where we're starting. I'm going to first give the definition of, like, where does narcissism come from? When I looked it up, it was talking about self-love, but, so like you being in love with yourself, I guess. But, like, from my understanding, like, in terms of as narcissistic personality disorder, it's kind of the opposite of self-love, which self-love would be like thinking highly of yourself, having, I wouldn't say like a false sense of appreciation of yourself, but like maybe just, I guess, like uplift, like having a healthy self-image and sort of promoting that, like being verbal about it. That's how I would see self-love. But I would think narcissism is not self-love, because usually narcissism comes from having a fragile ego. I can't talk. Having a fragile ego, either from early childhood experiences or just like not really having solidified your place as you see yourself in social structure, like who you want to be, what you want to do, your identity, I guess. And so then you sort of take on this sort of, I guess I always say, the mask or the false persona of a self that may not actually be your genuine, true personality, but just something you sort of show the world to sort of get by and get along. So this myth that the word comes from is the myth in Greek mythology of Narcissus and Echo. And Echo was like a water nymph, I guess, not a siren, but just, I guess, like somewhat not a mermaid either, but I don't know, like a water creature that's not negative. Like a lot of the water creatures, like the sirens in Greek mythology, are actually, they don't have souls. They're like evil, really, because they like they call out the sailors and try to get them to crash their ships and get and then come in and then they try to drown them. So water nymph is nothing like a siren, but it's more like a playful, happy, creature. And so she was with Zeus and the other water nymphs, and they were playing a game. And one of his steady, I don't know if she was his wife or he has multiple wives, I can't remember with Zeus, but Hera, she was super jealous. So she came up just to make sure he wasn't, having a, I guess, affair with one of them. And when she came up there, Echo, I guess she's like kind of the leader of the little group or whatever, and or maybe she was the boldest of them, but she tries to delay Hera so that Zeus and the other, her water nymph sisters, whatever, can go to a different body of water. And while she's talking to Hera, Hera starts to get really angry, and she says, you're just you're stalling this, you're trying to trick me. And so Hera casts like I guess you'd call it a curse on her, and makes it so like whenever she's talking, or listening to other people talking in a conversation, she's only going to be able to say the end of whatever their sentence was. Like, she can never like form sentences or talk as herself anymore. She just is going to echo what other people say, but only the end of their conversation. It's kind of strange. But so anyway, she starts running through the forest because she's upset about what happened to her voice, and she sort of finds this gorgeous young man, and he's I think he has long hair, and he is, well, I mean, like in paintings I've always seen him, he either had like long like curly black hair or like dark brown. And she sees him and she's like super excited to make friends with him, but remember, she can only say the end of other people's sentences. So they sort of get into this weird conversation where it's like she's just sort of mimicking things he says, and he doesn't really understand her. And he gets really agitated at her at one point where he's just sort of pushes her off him because she tries to hug him, and he's just kind of like, leave me alone, or, and he goes to the body of water where Zeus had been, but it isn't anymore. And he lays down on his stomach and sort of looks in like he's gonna drink from the water. And as he's doing that, he sees his own reflection. And I guess, because they didn't have mirrors back then, or at least in this story, he doesn't know what he looks like. And so the mirrored image of him in the water of his face, that's like literally the first time he's ever seen himself. And I guess he thinks he's rather attractive. And so he starts falling in love with his own image. And so, he's like leaning real close to the water, and he's like trying to touch his face, and he's calling whoever's in the water beloved. And he tries to at one point he tries to lean down and kiss the beloved, but when he does that, it makes the water just just him touching it, it makes the water I don't know what you call it, trickle sideways or whatever. So he loses his image of himself, and then he freaks out, and I think he says something like, "I love you, don't go away," or something. And then of course Echo's somewhere in the trees, and she comes out, and she's saying just the ends of what he says. So I've seen the painting, like the famous painting of it. I can't remember the artist right off the top of my head, but I want to say Waterhouse, but I don't know that that's true. He's a British painter. But anyway, there's a famous painting of him like looking in the water, and she's sort of sitting over by like a tree or some flowers, and he's looking at himself and she is looking at him. So it's like, get it? Like, narcissists are supposed to be like solely focused on themselves and what the world can do for them and what people can do for them. And it's all sort of, I would say because they're in love with themselves, it's more like they worship themselves instead of worshiping like God, or worshiping, or like putting other people first. They put themselves first, like they're their first concern, even if like they have children or whatever. Like they're their own focus, like whatever they can get out of the world that's going to serve their purpose and benefit them the most, regardless of how the other person feels. That's what they're that's where they're going to put their focus. And they're most concerned, actually, true narcissist in psychology would be more concerned with how other people see the reflection than how they see themselves. Because usually, without the mask or without the persona, as Jung would say, they usually don't like themselves, or they're not good enough to themselves. So, but they would want to be putting forth a picture of themselves being, successful and, attractive and like to everyone around them. So in a way, it's like the origin of it in art and myth doesn't really match up to the clinical diagnosis of it, which is something altogether. But let's see, they pull some of this stuff. I don't even remember where I got this research from. It's saying those attracted to narcissists are usually flawed themselves. Narcissists are obsessed with outward appearance. Okay, so I think the reason it's saying the thing that the ones who are attracted to narcissists are flawed is because actually empaths are supposed to be as flawed as the narcissists. They're just opposite sides of the same spectrum. I'll explain that later. Narcissists are consumed by themselves and their own perceived beauty, according to this. They prioritize infatuation with themselves, worship of themselves above everything else and everyone else. Narcissists consume themselves because, like, later in their lives, it's usually not as awesome as it is, like, in terms of people, fawning all over them, like, that sort of, as they age, and their temper, it's like, as they age, their looks start to fade, and their temperament gets worse. And as they're able to get less out of other people in the world for their own ego satisfaction, it's like their temperament gets worse. And at that point, they've usually burned through a lot of personal relationships, so they might have a very lucrative career situation still going on, or monetary items, and anyway, so the last things it said here are their behavior usually consumes itself. They die alone or die with those infatuated still with them. They go down in self-glory, taking those attracted to them down with them. So in the end, narcissism is self-destructive and simultaneously destructive to others. All right. So if we are looking at narcissism as a possible diagnosis for King Herod, it's like kind of like King Saul was. I guess King Saul was completely obsessed with other people, especially other leaders, finding him to be, the best warrior or the greatest king. Or he was very swayed in his office as how he was perceived by other people he thought were very important. And that was one of his downfalls in terms of losing favor with God, is because he was more concerned about his reputation and his image being king than he was angry at the Lord because the Lord had taken away. I mean, he had been highly anointed. He was anointed like he was one of God's chosen, but he lost that because I've said before in other videos, he broke several rules. I think he went up to 3 by the third covenant rule he had with God, God turned off the communication between them, so he wasn't able to hear God anymore. And then God sent to teach him a lesson for the last, I don't know what you want to call it, error he made, mistake he had chosen to make. But I think that had to do with Samuel supposedly was supposed to do a ritual over the food and livestock or whatever he had taken from whatever battle he had won, but he didn't wait till Samuel got there because he didn't want to look badly in front of the other kingdom. And one of the things he had done wrong is he like won the battle, but then he didn't even he let the king of the other nation live, and some of his I don't know if it's his servants or his family or his wives or something, or children, but whatever he did, that was like not what you're supposed to do. You know, if you slay and win over another group of people, you're supposed to, dethrone that person, which he didn't do. And so he got punished for that. And what ended up happening is I don't know what you want to call it, a demonic spirit was sent to temporarily sort of make his mind crazed so that he would understand that he was disordered. He was not in alignment with God. It was like a punishment, but it wasn't like something that was going to stay with him. It was temporary. And during that time, that's when he got David to come start playing music for him with the harp and sing to him, so that, because it seemed to be that was the only thing that would make the demonic spirit like stop messing with him, like the sound of the music. But King Saul definitely had like complete paranoia. Like he was convinced, and even when the demonic influence wasn't there after it had left, he was constantly paranoid. He was convinced that other people were coming after him, other rulers were going to take him, even though he had no knowledge, or he had got no message about anything like that, or he had spies in the court, and like nobody had said anything. Like, it's just like I kind of think it was like his own, I don't know what you want to call it, his own conscience. Like he knew he had he didn't want to face the fact that like basically his behavior was the reason he was kind of in the lowered status. As soon as he found out that David was anointed and going to be taking his place, it's like he just lost it, and he started to just constantly be paranoid about losing his place as the king and being usurped. That's like literally all he thought about, and he wanted to kill David before that happened. But at the same time, he didn't want to lose David, because David was the one who was making the spirit stop torturing him mentally. So it was kind of like make a choice, pick which one do you want. Do you want him to help you, or do you want to kill him? Make up your mind. You can't have both. So it's like, it's just not rational. And like, that's kind of like what happened to Saul with like his paranoia, is like he stopped being, because like he was really a great leader in battle, and that was one area he was considered really proficient at. And it's like he was just got super disorganized, and like in the last battle he fights, he like totally loses. I think one of his sons dies. I mean, it's just like a mess. He's just, he's like a true example of what happens if somebody lets their mental health, like, deteriorate to the point where they're not taking care of themselves. They're not, you know, he wasn't, like, even taking care of his physical self. He was just staying up all night, like, letting himself be led by these hallucinations, and just letting, like, greed and jealousy and envy, mainly envy, like, just eat him up. And he tried to kill David a couple times, throwing spears at him, but, you know, David was like half his age, so he was able to, you know, jump out of the way. And then David ended up trying to kill him. No, that's not true. David ended up twice being in a place where he could have murdered him, because actually Saul made him flee his own country, and like he ended up having to go live with the Philistines, like where Goliath came from. Like he ended up having to go live in like the enemy's like kingdom, because he wasn't welcome in his own, because Saul had, you know, a price on his head. So anyway, during that whole, I don't remember how many years that went on, but he had two chances where he could have killed Saul, and both times he chose not to, because he believed more in the anointing that that proverb of, you know, touch not my anointed, don't harm anybody chosen. So even though he was chosen, he considered Saul had been anointed, as had Samuel. So he didn't want to disobey God and take justice in his own hands. He didn't want to do that. So he spared Saul, even though Saul would have, you know, if he could aim right, would have killed him already. So where am I with this? Oh, King Herod. King Herod has similar diagnoses, basically, from what I read, which is that he's consumed by paranoia. And this is after he made that command to kill all the male children who were under the age of 2, because he wanted to get rid of Jesus before Jesus, you know, when Jesus was born, he couldn't tell who was Jesus. So he put the law out that all these male children would be killed. And that's why Jesus is born in a manger, because Joseph and Mary are fleeing King Herod. And I feel like they were fleeing taxes for some reason too, but maybe I get that wrong. But that's how they end up not in the place, I can't remember the name of it, the place where they all lived. They had to end up going to Bethlehem to get away from, because of Herod. And in the end, King Herod, I mean, he's a really awful person in general. He falls in love with this young girl. I guess he's like 13 years old or something. And he has his own wife and son killed because he wants to marry her instead. And she has no desire to be with him, but family makes her, or he takes her, I'm not sure. It's just some long name. I'm not going to say what it is. But anyway, he does that. And at some point, he kills his own, I guess he has sons with her. And he kills at least 1 or 2 of them. I don't know if it's out of paranoia or because he's worried they're going to take over his throne. But that's just what Jezebel's daughter did when I did the last video. I can't pronounce her name. All these names are just like, let's go on and on. Hers started with an A. And Jezebel's daughter ended up killing her own grandsons because they were, their lineage was the line of King David, and she wanted to wipe out his entire line, and she didn't care if it was her own grandchildren. So, yeah, they're pretty ruthless in these Old Testament's pretty, yeah, it's really graphic. Okay, let's see if I had some other information here. Oh, this is about demon possessions and about antisocial. During this time period, people would often blame any kind of mental illness if people were acting, you know, not rational, or if there was something wrong with them. A lot of times people at that time would just assume that the person was, had been hit by different demonic spirits that had taken over their vessel, and that mental illness was considered more like a religious or spiritual condemnation, like a judgment. Anyway, King Saul, no, is that King Herod? It turned out he wasn't even, he becomes like the leader of the Jewish people in Judea, but like he's Arab, so I felt that. Sorry, sleepy from cold medicines. Let's see. King Saul, he had antisocial traits, lack of empathy, disinhibited and egotistical traits. At first they were considered, maybe because he was trying to be powerful and boastful, and not maybe psychopathy, but as he kept being king, he started to get, like I said, paranoid. He lost empathy for other people. He stopped showing care and concern for those of his court, and he just became focused solely on his own survival. Let's see. Yeah, King Herod ended up having a really gruesome death. He was actually talking in a speech to some group of people, and he was bragging, and they said an angel from God came down and struck him. He wasn't dead, but they struck him so that he was in severe pain, and I guess he had chronic liver disease. It gets nasty. He gets gangrene, and like he has some sort of crazy stomach issues. He ends up having this horrible, disgusting, drawn-out death. The massacre of the innocents in 4 BC was what they called when Herod tried to have all those young boys killed. Let's see. Yeah, so because Herod did not give glory to God, an angel of the Lord struck him down. He was consumed by worms and died. A punishment for his arrogance. Driven by suspicion of adultery or plots to seize power, he killed his favorite wife, Marianne. I mean, I don't know what age she was. She had grown up. That was the one he had killed the first wife to be with, to marry her. He killed not only her, his mother-in-law, and 3 of his own sons. That's way more than I thought. I thought he was only one. He had a furious rage, and that sort of took over his personality, which actually we see that with Pharaoh. When the plagues come, he also is enraged. He should be enraged at himself, because he's the one who wouldn't let the people go, or, you know, all the plagues wouldn't happen. But it was like his heart was hardened, and he just refused to, just look at objectively what was happening, like what he was up against, which was like the wrath of God. So I'm always surprised, I gotta say this, I'm always shocked and surprised by how little anybody in the Bible seems to have like fear. Not how little many people, because a lot of people in the Bible have fear of God, but it always seems like there's a lot of people in like high positions, and maybe that's why they don't fear him, because they feel like they're